What's up guys, my name is Ace and welcome to Caldera. Yesterday I was fortunate enough to be invited out to an event to play Caldera early and capture this gameplay to share with you guys. So big thank you to Activision and Call of Duty for the invite to that. And in today's video, I'm just going to share my honest overall impressions of Caldera based on the very small amount of playtime that I've had so far. A big thing to keep in mind with the gameplay in the background, it's straight up not going to be that great. I haven't played Warzone for literally months. And a lot of the people I was playing against are dedicated Warzone streamers and tournament players. And I also didn't realize we were allowed to make pre-made squads, so I didn't get a squad set up and ready to go. I was just hopping in random and it would throw me with whoever. So that didn't necessarily make for the best first impression gameplay-wise playing on this map. But now that we have my gameplay excuses out of the way, I am going to try to put that aside and realize that this isn't the typical lobby that people will be running into. But yeah, let's just first talk about the map itself. The very first thing that I noticed when I hopped into this map, and the thing I love about this map probably the most out of anything, is just the fact that it is so bright and vibrant. This is a much better setting to be in. It doesn't feel like dark and washed out and depressing and no saturation or anything. This is actually a very nice place to be, and I actually feel like that impacts my mood while playing the game, and that's a good thing. I know that might sound like a bit of a silly thing, but for me, I really like that. Having said this, though, I had a really hard time with visibility while playing. It seems like there's a lot more textures going on and enemies were blending in way more effectively than I remember them blending in Verdansk. And this could be partially just down to the learning curve, and I just need to know the map better and know where I should be looking for players and where I shouldn't be looking for players. But yeah, that is something that I noticed throughout my entire play session, is there was many times where I was like straining my eyes. I could see somebody on the mini-map, and I was pretty sure I knew exactly where they were, and I'd aim down sight, and I'm searching all over for them, and I literally just can't see them even though they're right there. But overall, still, I really like the brightness and the color that's involved in this map. And so far, I kind of like what I'm seeing layout-wise here as well. This is something that needs much more gameplay time to be able to judge properly, so you need to be able to actually like play throughout the entire map, which obviously we didn't have enough time to do. That is going to take some time to really learn and master the map. But a big thing I notice about this in comparison to Verdansk is it seems like the points of interest are more so isolated. They're not all interconnected like we see in Verdansk. I think there's a lot more openness between the points of interest. And this does change up the gameplay pacing and style a little bit. I found that a lot more of the gunfights that I was seeing were taking place out in the open rather than inside buildings. And to me, that is refreshing. I like that. I find in Verdansk, a lot of times people have no real incentive to move out of buildings or move out of a cluster of buildings. Whereas in Caldera, it really feels like if you want to get decent loot, you've got to be on the move and covering ground to get that loot, which definitely changes up how the gameplay is approached. On top of this, another big gameplay change that I noticed while playing through this is it really seems like the mid-game is sped up quite a bit. There isn't as much of that downtime like I remember seeing all the time in Verdansk, where you drop in, you'd usually get a lot of action early on if you wanted it and you were searching for it. But once all those initial fights took place, it really seemed like in Verdansk, there was often a big lull in the mid-game, and then toward the end of the game, of course, the pacing would pick up quite a bit as the circles start moving faster and faster and getting smaller and smaller. Whereas in Caldera, it felt like a much more consistent pacing throughout, where I just feel like there wasn't as much of that mid-game lull, although at the same time, that perception could be very easily skewed by the types of players that were in the lobbies, because obviously everybody's there to capture gameplay. They tend to be very high-skilled players and aggressive players, so that may be skewing my perception a little bit when it comes to the pacing. As for the Vanguard weapons, keeping in mind the gameplay you're seeing in the background is from Vanguard Royale, which limits you to using only Vanguard weapons. You can't use Modern Warfare Cold War weapons in this particular mode. And I was actually fairly surprised to see that the Vanguard weapons handle pretty similarly to what we're seeing in Vanguard's multiplayer. So at least when it comes to like your aim down sight times and your recoil patterns and stuff, it seems like they are very, very similar to what we see in multiplayer. Obviously, I wasn't able to use absolutely every gun from Vanguard in our short little play session here, but the handling, at least, and the recoil felt very comparable. However, I was able to test some of the damage values on some of the guns, and it appears they are not following suit with Vanguard's multiplayer, so I have no idea what the best gun is at this point, not until we get some time to test some things. But some of the ones I was enjoying quite a bit, and I noticed a lot of other people gravitating toward as well, would be the BAR with 50 BMG, the NZ41, that was also a great assault rifle. The Thompson seemed to be really nice and consistent with a great magazine capacity for close range. The MP40 handled fairly well as well. And quite surprisingly, the Kar 98 felt really good. I didn't think it would be as good as the existing Kar 98 in Warzone, but I played around with it a little bit and it felt great in this. So if you do have a little bit of time to kill before this update and you want to level some guns up in Vanguard, I'd focus on those ones. Although, of course, there are going to be others that will pop up that end up being great as well. Now, moving on, let's talk a little bit about the planes and the dogfighting. I think I'm going to make a dedicated video just showing off the planes a bit more, but in general, I actually really like the extra layer of gameplay that this adds to Warzone. At least so far. That's my initial impressions. I think once people get really good at controlling those, they may end up being a problem, but I also noticed there's plenty of those anti-aircraft trucks around the map, and it seemed like they were working effectively. Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to actually try one of those out, but I noticed people were getting shot down with those fairly often. So yeah, at least initial impressions of the planes, they seem like a nice welcome addition to Warzone. I don't think they're too ridiculously overpowered, but again, people haven't had much time to really play around with them and truly master them. So far, those are a bunch of the things that I noticed that are new and have changed, as well as my impressions on them. Now I want to get into sort of a frequently asked questions section of the video, because I know a lot of you guys have questions about the Warzone Pacific update, as well as the Caldera map, and I'm going to answer as many of these to the best of my ability. The first big one that I unfortunately still don't have an answer for, at least at the time of recording this video, will there be an FOV slider for console? I don't have a clue. Unfortunately, everybody had to play on PC for this particular event. There was no console event for this that I'm aware of, at least, so I don't know if there will be an FOV slider for console, whether that's previous gen or current gen. However, I've got to say it's not really looking good, because another really big question that a lot of people have had for a long time is which client will this game be running on? Is it still attached to Modern Warfare 2019? Is it its own new client now where it's just Warzone? Or is it now attached to Vanguard? And again, we only played this on PC, so this may end up being different for console, but at least on PC, with the build that we played, it was still contained within the Modern Warfare 2019 client. When you boot up the game, it's still going to show that you're playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. And therefore, if that follows suit with console, then it's not likely that we're going to be seeing an FOV slider as well, but I could be wrong on that, only time will tell here. Next up, a really frequently asked question is, what are the perks in Warzone now? Have they transitioned into the Vanguard perks, or are they the same perks that we've had in Warzone? And it turns out it is the latter. We still have the exact same perks from the existing Warzone game. Perhaps there have been some adjustments made to these perks, but as far as I can tell at least, they were literally exactly the same with no additions and no changes that I could see. Now, the same thing goes with equipment, but I did want to mention, if you play Vanguard Royale, this is the one that just limits you to Vanguard weapons. Obviously, you still have access to any of the perks, because that's just the same regardless of the modes, but it is worth mentioning that a lot of the equipment is restricted in Vanguard Royale, including the heartbeat sensor, which is great. It looks like they're just sticking to the more basic equipment for Vanguard Royale, and then of course, if you want to play the standard Battle Royale mode, which opens you up to using any weapon you want from Modern Warfare or Cold War or Vanguard, in that case, you can use any of the equipment that you'd like. As for the buy station, a lot of people would be curious to see what's in the buy station now. And this is from Vanguard Royale. As you can see here, it's pretty much the same stuff. We still have those Modern Warfare kill streaks, although with the precision airstrikes, they sound completely different and way too loud in the build that we played. But that's sort of beside the point. Another thing I noticed is UAVs are $6,000 now. And I think they used to only be $4,000, although keep in mind, I haven't played Warzone for months, so maybe this is a change they made a little while back and I just was unaware of it. But at least in the build we played, UAVs cost $6,000 in quads. As for the Gulag, if you guys haven't seen it yet, this is what the Gulag looks like, at least the current state of the Gulag. I'm sure this will change from season to season, like they've always been doing in Warzone. And then let's talk a little bit about the movement. It looks like we do not have that tactical sprint delay that is present in Vanguard's multiplayer, and instead, it's still the traditional movement from Modern Warfare. So as far as I can tell, at least, it is literally the same movement that we already have in Warzone, and this also means climbing rocks is still a big issue. In fact, it may even be more of an issue on this map because there is more of that verticality toward the center of the map. There's a lot of rocks that need to be climbed, and it's still very difficult to be climbing up certain surfaces and rocks. Additionally, if you're playing Vanguard Royale, you are going to be limited to World War II vehicles. These are all brand new vehicles that work completely different from the vehicles that we already have in Warzone. And I did manage to drive the Jeep as well as the cargo truck, and both of them are really slow and clunky, terrible acceleration, Not a very good turn radius either. They're basically death traps to be inside of these from what I've noticed at least. So I think there's going to be less of a focus on vehicle gameplay, and at least my initial impression is they're just going to be used to get from point A to point B reasonably quickly, but also it's sort of a high-risk thing to be in a vehicle from what I can tell. And with that, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today's video. As for my overall impressions of this and whether or not this is really going to bring me back into Warzone, honestly, probably only for a little bit. I think I'm just done with Battle Royales personally. Yes, this is really refreshing. It's nice to finally have a full-on brand new map for Warzone. But at the end of the day, it's still Warzone. It still plays very much like Warzone has always played. A lot of the mechanics are identical. There have been some nice quality of life improvements. And sure, the map does have some different flow to it, and it will play very different from Verdansk. But if you're somebody that hasn't really been enjoying Warzone for a long time and you don't really like it, I don't know if this map is going to be enough to truly refresh things for you long term. Maybe for a little bit it's going to be new and exciting and refreshing, but if you didn't like Warzone before this update, I don't know if this update's going to be enough to make you suddenly fall in love with the game. On the bright side though, for those that have been absolutely loving Warzone and are still loving it till this day, I think this is going to be a great refresher for you, and you may end up loving it even more than before. Now, of course, that is just my opinion based on my very limited play session against absolute beasts in this game. Of course, my impressions will likely change as I get some more gameplay time in public matches. And also, I'm very curious to see how the Ricochet anti-cheat ends up playing out, because if that's really effective, I think that could also improve my impression of this game quite a bit as well. I am, of course, curious to hear from you guys in the comment section below, though. Based on what you've seen here and all of the information that I provided for you, what are you thinking about this Warzone Pacific update so far? Do you think this is going to be a great refresher for Warzone and it's just going to liven things up again and you're going to fall in love with it, or you're going to carry on your love for it? Or were you hoping for more? Were you hoping that more would be changing gameplay-wise with this Warzone Pacific update? Just let me know those thoughts down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated. And don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.